Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 459 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not going to ask you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me out. I think the most exciting sporting event this weekend that just passed was Georgia and Alabama. And I'm going to explain to you what happened in the game. I'm explaining to you my takes, but let me first explain why I think that was the most exciting sports event that we got this weekend. I think the answer to this question lies first with, why do we love college sports so much? Why do we love college football, college basketball so much? Yes, because of the unpredictability. Yes, because of the excitement and the adrenaline of, a close game or a powerhouse teams going at it. No, I think one of the biggest reasons why we love sports so much is because sometimes not even the fans can draw up in our minds how some of these sporting events, a lot of times college football, college basketball, how they end. But in the same breath, they end exactly the way that we would want to. Let me explain. When number 2 Georgia goes up against number 4 Alabama, what do we hope? You hope for a good game. You hope for an exciting finish. You hope for the ending to have a proper representation of both sides of the ball. And you ultimately want a good game. I think that's the underlining reason of why we love college sports. There's not a lot. There are some, but there's not many blowouts when you have two teams that are viewed to be close in talent. And that is obviously what Georgia, who is ranked number 2 going in, and Alabama, who was ranked number 4 going in, was. You don't want to blow out. We want to feel like we got our time's worth watching both of these programs go together, and that's exactly what happened. Alabama beat Georgia 41-34. Now, the final score is exactly indicative of how close the game was, but it wasn't indicative of how we got there. For people that didn't watch, I think Alabama went up 28-0, at least for sure 21-0. It was looking like it was going to be the blowout of the century, man. I don't think enough is talked about of how seamless Kellen DeBoer has transferred from Washington to Alabama. When we think of Alabama, we don't really think of a fast, we don't really think of a creative offense. We think of power. We think of just greatness. And that's no offense to Nick Saban. But when we think about the past Alabama teams, we think of greatness, but we don't really think of creativity. And again, that's no disrespect, but it's just uniformal. We do the same thing over and over again. And that formula has been successful for Alabama. It has been successful for multiple players that have been there, whether we talk about Devontae Smith, whether we talk about Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, Mac Jones. There's a successful formula that Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide has found, and they've stuck to it for years. So when you look at this Alabama team led by Jalen Milroe, coached by Kellen DeBoer, it doesn't look exactly like the uniformal Alabama that we've seen. And that's not a bad thing. And I think Georgia learned that the hard way, at least the first half of the game. When you look at these numbers, Now, obviously, this is a totality of the game, but Carson. Actually, let's before we get to the numbers, going into it, there was a question of who was going to be. There are a few quarterbacks this year that will definitely find themselves in conversation, not only for the Heisman, but for high draft pick slots going into the next year's draft. And Jalen Milroe, along with Carson Beck, were two names that were talked about highly in both instances. Carson Beck, we know how it ended for Georgia last year as far as not making to the college football playoffs, as they had a undefeated season until they met Alabama, the last regular season game. Then we also know Alabama, they went to the college football playoffs and lost to Michigan. But you're bringing two quarterbacks back, like I said, Milroe in Alabama and Carson Beck in Georgia, that not only have experience, but have a plethora of weapons around them, both on the offensive side of the ball, both on the offensive line, both on the defense. So going into it, I think that this was a big game for both Beck and Milroe. Georgia has looked great, but they haven't looked like the dominant Georgia that we thought we would see. Alabama, on the other hand, it's been kind of hard to quantify what we've seen from Alabama because, again, it doesn't look like anything that we're used to when we're talking about Alabama. But we do know that we've seen greatness. We've seen greatness out of Jalen Milroe. We've seen greatness out of the 17-year-old Ryan Williams. We have seen greatness. It's kind of hard for our brains to comprehend. This is a different dominant Alabama team. So going into this game, there is we know about the movement that's been in college football, especially when we talk about the Big Ten, but there's also been movement in the SEC, adding teams like Texas, adding teams like Oklahoma. And you don't want to, how do I say this? Going into this game, one thing that we know about college football is in previous years, maybe not the last, I'll say 3 or 4, but before then, there's always been one or two teams that have very early on separated themselves from the pack. It doesn't mean the pack hasn't been good, but there's always been one or two teams that has risen fast. In fact, I will probably say last year was Michigan. Michigan, even with all the stuff going on with Jim Harbaugh, even with all the stuff going on with the sign stealing, Michigan kind of separated themselves with J.J. McCarthy, with Blake Corum. They separated themselves from the pack. And we haven't really seen that outside of last year in the last few years, but that's typically what we see. And typically, that team that separates is Alabama. And there was 2 straight years. I think it was Stetson Bennett. Georgia was on that list too, I think a few years ago, especially with Stetson Bennett. So while it is a tradition pretty much that one or two teams kind of separate because they just have better recruiting class, they have a better roster. For the last few years, outside of a handful, there hasn't really been much separation. There's been more parity in college sports, more so basketball, but in college sports than anything. I think when we talk about the transfer portal, when we talk about NILs and how, smaller, less dominant schools are able to attract better players because of the deals that are attached to their school or because of the deals that a player can get if they go to said school, it has made parity much greater in the college realm. But Saturday kind of felt like there's been probably one or two teams that you can feel are kind of slipping away from the pack, and those teams have been Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. And you can kind of argue Ohio State, but when you look at the caliber and opponents, it still gives you a little bit of pause. So this game was huge for both Georgia and Alabama because we wanted to know, okay, are these two teams legit as far as are they starting to separate from the pack? And if so, which one is kind of separating further? Because right now we kind of believe that Texas has been the best team, but we're not 100% sure. Or if we are sure, we don't know necessarily how wide the gap is. Georgia going down 28 to 0 made it feel like there was such a wide gap. That was probably the most shocking thing about this Georgia-Alabama game is that Georgia was down as much as 28 points. And Trevor Etienne hasn't really had that breakout game, but when you have Aaron Smith going for 132 yards and you have Dylan Bell going for 100 yards for Georgia, it's like, yo, how in the world is there such a gap? That's why I kind of started this with shouts out to Alabama, bro. Like they are starting to they're dominating. I'm sorry. They're dominating. It just doesn't look like the dominating that we're used to seeing from an Alabama team. But then Georgia woke up. And Georgia realized, all right, we're Georgia. And they came all the way back to essentially take the lead. But because they built themselves such a hole, it was, yeah. But Carson Beck had a decent game. He threw for 439 yards. He did have 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Jalen Milroe was on 374 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think the star of the game and the one that had the game-winning touchdown was Ryan Williams, who, by the way, is 17 years old. 6 receptions for 177 yards. This game had everything that you could ask for. It had a unpredictable feel to it because nobody would have predicted Georgia being down 28 to 0. It had it's like all the script writers came in and they all just started throwing to the wall their ideas. Okay, let's have a huge deficit. Let's have a team overcome that deficit and essentially take the lead. Then as soon as Georgia took the lead, I think a play or two later, Alabama comes back and scores. I feel much there. I don't believe in moral victories. I think that there are positives and negatives that you can take out of both wins and losses, but I don't really believe in moral victories. But what I will say is this. If I'm Georgia, I feel bad, but I don't feel as bad after this game as I would have done before, because I feel if you eliminate the turnovers by Carson Beck and you play the Georgia brand of football from the jump, I'm not saying that you would necessarily win, but what I am saying is it would be I don't think you'd be down 28-0. And if I'm Alabama, I'm like, yo, I think there's a reason why Alabama jumped from 4-1. And I think that also shows, seeing as though Texas is undefeated, Alabama's undefeated, there's a bunch of undefeateds, and no one has looked exceptional outside of this game. Which is why there's a lot of things that's changed after this game. The Heisman favorites have changed. The NFL draft NFL draft, mock drafts have changed. A lot has changed from this. I will, however, say this. If I am Georgia, like I said, there's positives and negatives you can take out of both. And I'll be skeptical on both. Or I'll play the negative on both. If I'm Georgia, there were questions going in as to how you look great, but you don't look dominant. There's a reason why a team that going into Saturday was undefeated got jumped by Texas. You haven't looked exceptional. And a lot of the question marks, a lot of the issues that we have had with this Georgia team, even though they were undefeated and even though they were ranked higher than Alabama, all the issues, all the concerns that we had were realized in this game. When you look at the running game, we thought Trevor Etienne was going to have a much bigger role than he has had this year. Not saying that it won't get better, not saying that he won't get better, not saying that he won't grow as a player, but the running game has been damn near non-existent for Georgia. Don't get me wrong, bro. Carson Beck is good, but I don't think there is any plan going into a Georgia game. I don't think there is any game plan where they have Carson Beck throwing 50 times. I just don't see that happening, especially when you have a person like Trevor Etienne. And on top of that, this was probably Aaron Smith's best game. This is probably Dylan Bell's best game. Outside of that, where is the offense coming from? And I think one of the bigger question marks is the defense hasn't looked as dominant as it's looked from past years. And is that going to be a hindrance to them, or are they going to be able to overcome that? Because again, over the past few years, you've had damn near entire NFL defenses on the Georgia Bulldogs team. So there are still huge question marks coming out of Georgia, but I do feel that for Georgia, they can feel better after the game than the media is kind of putting them. Well, how do I say this? There are some positives and some negatives to take out, and depending on what side of the fence that you want to be on, I think that there are a lot of positives and there are a lot of negatives. And for Alabama, obviously the positive is when they're firing on all cylinders, when you have Jalen Milroe running. Jalen Milroe threw for 374 yards and rushed for 117 yards. Like, I don't think you understand, bro. That doesn't happen. The man almost totaled 500 yards. Like, damn. So the marriage between Kellen DeBoer and Alabama has gone perfectly. You couldn't ask for a better marriage. You couldn't ask for a more seamless transition from Washington to Alabama. You couldn't ask for a better quarterback to take the helm with a Kellen DeBoer offense like Jalen Milroe. I don't think there is a better offensive weapon outside of the quarterback position in college football right now, outside of Ryan Williams. You can talk about how I forgot it. I know his name. I just don't know how to say it exactly. But the running back from Boise State definitely has a claim. But outside of him, Ryan Williams, and to be as young as he is just different. But then you can also say, all right, hold up. In the second half, we only scored 11 points to their 27. That's kind of crazy. So, shouts out and congratulations to Alabama for beating Georgia 41-34. And I think the beauty of it watching is everything that you can ask for in college football, all the excitement, the roller coaster of emotions for both sides of the ball or both sides of the field, meaning both teams, we got. And that game was a perfect example of why people love college football so much. That was a perfect. Right now, I don't think there's, obviously it's very early, but I don't think there is a close second to game of the year. You can argue the Georgia Tech Miami game that was on Friday, I believe, but yeah, that was the game of the year so far. Speaking of game of the year, let's move over to week 4 of the NFL and essentially what we saw. And the first game I want to talk about is, to me, the statement game of the year so far, and that is the Baltimore Ravens beating the Buffalo Bills 35-10. Let me read to you, or let me tell you all the headlines going into this game. Or let me tell you all the storylines going into this game. One of the storylines you can look at in a broader sense and say that this was a storyline going back to week 1, as in, how were the Baltimore Ravens going to fare after losing a bunch of pieces on both the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball, more specifically the offensive line. And we know how good Derrick Henry can be. We know how good Lamar Jackson can be. But is Derrick Henry aging? And have we seen a clear ceiling to Lamar Jackson? And is that ceiling a Super Bowl caliber ceiling? Going into this game, you're going against a Buffalo Bills team that has damn near shattered all question marks that it has had before this game. Remember, there were more question marks about the Buffalo Bills than there were the Baltimore Ravens going into the season. Losing as many skill pieces as the Buffalo Bills lost, and it didn't seem like they did a good job in replacing those skilled positions. A lot of people, including myself on this podcast, did not have a lot of expectations for this Buffalo Bills team. I had a lot of expectations for Josh Allen, but as a Buffalo Bills team as a whole, no. And going into the season, there was a lot more question marks as to, okay, how are you did also lose a defensive coordinator. How are the Baltimore Ravens going to look? And up until week 4, both teams looked, I'm not going to say drastically different, but looked different. Baltimore was stepping in 2-1. And they were outside of probably they were a couple plays away from being 3-0. And the Buffalo Bills were 3-0 and looked dominant. They beat the Dolphins, they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they beat, can't remember the last team, but they have looked dominant. Josh Allen, to me, has looked like a front runner for the MVP so far, and they have completely silenced all the questions that I have had going into this game. But quietly, even though that it is only week 4, there was a lot of pressure in this game. This was probably the first time the Buffalo Bills, at least roster-wise and expectation-wise, you looked across and you saw the team that you could say is on the level of the Bills. And for the Baltimore Ravens, this would be their second time going up against a team that they could very well likely see towards the end of the year. Whether we're talking about playoffs, a team that they can see to get to the Super Bowl, you never know. And what we saw, it's very easy to take what we saw and have grand opinions about this game. You can look at what we saw and you can think to yourself, okay, the Baltimore Ravens are clearly the best team in football, and the Buffalo Bills are frauds. Though that is one side of this this game that's one side of the opinion train that you can take. And I'm not saying that you'd be wrong; it'd just be your opinion. You can also take it's just one game. Baltimore Ravens, they also lost the Raiders. And the Bills, they played a team in the Dolphins that they lost to and you see how the Dolphins have looked since. They played a team that's 0-4. Like, they're not that good. You can also say that. But here's what I'll take from it. I still think the Buffalo Bills are a really good team. I still think that the Buffalo Bills will be one of those teams that has something to say towards the end of the year in terms of who will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Not saying they would make the Super Bowl, not saying that they even make the AFC Championship. But what I'm saying is they are not a team to take lightly in any way, shape, or form. Josh Allen is still playing incredible. Josh Allen is still one of the best quarterbacks in football. And his relationship, his chemistry with Keon Coleman is continuing to rise. You still have James Cook. This defense is still pretty good. A lot better than I thought it would be after losing as many pieces that they lost. This offense is much better than I thought. Shakur has been great. This offense is much better than I thought it would be after losing the pieces that they lose, like a Stephon Diggs, like a Gabe Davis. And on the Baltimore Ravens side, there have been a lot of questions and there have been a lot of concerns before this game about the Baltimore Ravens, more specifically their offensive line, their defensive line, or their defense, and how their defense was, especially their secondary, was tied for like worst, giving up the most passing yards, I believe, in the NFL these first 2 years. First two games or first few weeks. But the Baltimore Ravens that we saw on Sunday Night Football, I think those are the Baltimore Ravens that we could see every week. I think now I don't know if Derrick Henry can go for 24 carries, 191 yards. I think he had a total, when we're talking about passing yards as well, I think he had a total of 215. But Derrick Henry going off. I don't expect 80-plus yard runs for Derrick Henry, but I do expect him, and this is what we've been talking about. When you feature Derrick Henry and constantly feature him, it opens up so much, not just for the running game in Lamar Jackson, but it opens up the passing game too. You see how wide open people like Zay Flowers, like Rashad Bateman, like Isaiah Likely, even Mark Andrews, even though he did drop a pass, how open they get because a team has to focus so heavily on the run. And the offensive line played incredible. The defense played incredible. I think That was the best performance that we saw the Baltimore Ravens have all year. And I think if they are able to maintain that or even come close to that, there will be an argument to who is the best team I'll at least say the AFC. Because if you look at the AFC in totality, there hasn't been that one team, even though there are undefeated games, there hasn't been that one team that has had that one performance that makes you feel like, oh, they are the best. Outside of the Baltimore Ravens going against the Buffalo Bills. Lamar Jackson had an incredible game. Hell, Justice Hill had 6 receptions for 78 yards and a touchdown. It seemed like every time they had a 3rd and long or a 3rd down play, they needed it, they gave it to Justice Hill. It was just... I'm not going to throw away the Buffalo Bills, and I'm not going to crown the Baltimore Ravens just yet. But what I will say is, both of these teams, more specifically the Baltimore Ravens, if that is the best that they can play, they are by far the best team, at least so far, in the AFC, even with their record being, 2-2. They went in 1-2, and now I feel more confident about them than I ever have. And they're about to go up against a team that just got their first win in their obvious divisional rivals in the Cincinnati Bengals. And for the Bills, I do think that when you play against a team like the Baltimore Ravens, when you play against a team that you can argue you're eye to eye with as far as talent, you have to come correct, and it's going to be very difficult, but you can't. Momentum is a crazy thing to go against. It's almost an impossible, impenetrable thing to go against. So when Derrick Henry's first carry is a 80+ yard touchdown run, you're in for a long night. If Sunday was any indication of how the Baltimore Ravens will play for the rest of the year, and if Sunday was an indication of their ceiling, then the Baltimore Ravens should have every bit of confidence that they can be the best team in football. And that was the best game that you saw. Even though Lamar Jackson did have a turnover, that's the best game that both Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry both had. So shouts out to the Baltimore Ravens for beating the Buffalo Bills. And again, I'm not throwing away the Buffalo Bills. I think that they are a really good team, and they just ran into a juggernaut. So shouts out to them as well. Now let's talk about the other game. I think the game that has the most talking points to it, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Chargers 17-10. And while I said that this game has probably the most talking points, none of it is about the Chargers. One of the biggest reasons why it's so hard to do something again, especially when we talk about do something successful again, is because there are a lot of especially in football, there's a lot of factors that go into doing something again successfully. There's a lot of things that have to go right for you to do something again. And when we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, we're not talking about doing something again. We're talking about doing something again for the 3rd time. There is a reason why there has never been a team in the history of the NFL, in the Super Bowl era, to win 3 straight Super Bowl championships. it's there is so much, whether we talk about nutrition, whether we talk about motivation, whether we talk about just teams as far as free agency and trades and salary cap, and there is so much that goes into a team's ability to repeat that if one of those things are off, it can drastically derail a team's chances, which we have seen time and time and time again. I'm not saying that Sunday was the official close, or I'm not saying that Sunday is the chapter, or is the we should completely close the book on the Kansas City Chiefs three-peating. But when you essentially lose your best wide receiver in Rashid Rice for the season with an ACL tear, on top of that, not all 4-0s are the same. The Minnesota, we'll talk about it later, but the Minnesota Vikings 4-0 looks much different than the Chiefs 4-0. I will give them credit. The Chiefs continue to win. It doesn't matter. They win. They beat the Ravens. They beat the Bengals. They beat the Chargers. They continue to find ways to win. Not one game. In fact, I will go as far as to say every single game that the Kansas City Chiefs has played, the other quarterback has seemingly played better than Patrick Mahomes, outside of the big moments that you need Patrick Mahomes to shine. I think he was outplayed by Lamar Jackson. I think he was outplayed by Joe Burrow. I even think on Sunday he was outplayed by Justin Herbert in some plays. But this just speaks to the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. If you give him opportunity, he's going to seize it. But seeing how human Patrick Mahomes has looked, seeing how the connection, even though it did wake up on Sunday, the connection with him and Travis Kelce haven't been the greatest this year. Again, even though Travis Kelce did have sort of a breakout game. I understand that the four pillars, I talked about this. If the Kansas City Chiefs have the four pillars, they are Super Bowl contenders. That is Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Andy Reid. If they have all four of those healthy, that they're Super Bowl contenders. You have one of the best defensive players, probably the best defensive end in football, or defensive tackle in football. You have the best quarterback in football. You have arguably the best tight end in football, and you have arguably the best coach in football. You have all three of those, or all four of those, you got yourself a Super Bowl contender. But we're really about to see the makeup of Patrick Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs team, because remember, they're also dealing with an injury to Isaiah Pacheco, who is a huge loss. And even though Kareem Hunt is and used to be on this team, he's not the Kareem Hunt of old. And this, obviously they can go and get someone in the trade deadline, which the Kansas City Chiefs do have a history of not being hesitant. If they need to go get a position, they'll go get it. So they could go trade for somebody, and all this can be mute. But when you look at that wide receiver core, now you're asking people that haven't needed to step up. Now they have to, like Xavier Worthy. And I think he has all the talent in the world to step up, but he's still a rookie. Or Sky Moore, who hasn't really done much of anything. You're already down Hollywood Brown. So I'm not saying that not having Rashid Rice ultimately spells the Kansas City Chiefs not winning, not completing the three-peat. But what I'm saying is not having Rashid Rice makes it 10 times more difficult, especially when you see when you see teams around you and how they're getting better week after week. Like the team I just talked about in the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm not going to disrespect them. Let's talk about the Chargers for a second. Obviously, how do I say this without sounding disrespectful? Because I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I don't know if there's a good way of me saying this without sounding disrespectful, so I'm just going to say it, and I don't mean any disrespect by it. There is a difference between the NFL and college. That's obvious. And I expect Jim Harbaugh to understand that. Seeing as though he has found success in college, he has found success in the NFL. But I think he has to... I don't know if it's the way that they practice. I don't know if it's just the players, but it seems like week after week after week, more and more players continue to drop for the Chargers. Injury after injury after injury. And it's just like, all right, something's like, whoa. I know that there's people that had extremely high hopes about this Chargers team this year. And I think that week after week, injury after injury, those hopes are constantly getting dashed. Look, I'm still holding out hope for Justin Herbert to bloom into one of those upper echelon quarterbacks. He has all the talent to be an upper echelon quarterback. He has the moments of him looking like an upper echelon quarterback. And I even started talking about this game as to say that Justin Herbert in a lot of areas of this game outplayed Patrick Mahomes. But it's been few and far between. And on top of that, when you see everyone around him, including himself, continue to get hurt, I'm starting to look. I have to look at the coaching staff like, yo, what's happening, bro? One or two players getting hurt, I get it. But this is 4 weeks in, and I don't think there's been a clean game for the Chargers. Meaning, I don't think that there's been a game where they left and there wasn't somebody that's like severely hurt. And on top of that, you're dealing with a talent deficiency. When you let as many players go as they did, and it doesn't really seem... I will say this, J.K. Dobbins has been good, but even J.K. Dobbins, you know what I mean? J.K. Dobbins has been good. Quentin Johnston, he's been extremely hot, then extremely cold. It's like, I don't know if you guys have played 2K, but remember the microwave badge? J.R. Smith is famous for having the microwave badge. Like, when J.R. Smith is hot, he is in fuego. Like, he is... When you have J.R. Smith hot, he is probably the greatest player in 2K history. He will hit anything. He'll hit leaners. He'll hit fadeaway threes. He'll hit laning threes. He'll dunk on anybody. When J.R. Smith is hot on NBA 2K, it's over with. You have yourself a win. Congratulations to you. But when he's cold, he is the worst player in 2K history. That's kind of how Quentin Johnston is. When Quentin Johnston, he's hitting, when he catches bombs, like, oh, shoot. There's a talent that they drafted him for. They saw at TCU, but then he'll have like a huge play, and then he'll have a moment where he needs to make a big play, and he'll drop the ball. It's like, Yeah, that's the Quentin Johnson we've used to. Hot and cold. For the Chargers side, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I don't know if they're getting coached too hard, if they're practicing too hard. But this is yet another week where there has been major injuries for the Chargers. Like, something's got to give. And for the Chiefs, if there's one player that you could not afford to get hurt, especially for the year right now, that's Rashid Rice, and that's exactly what we saw. Well, congratulations to the Chiefs for beating the Chargers 17-10, but I think that we have more question marks coming out of both teams out of this game than we had before. And I hope for a healthy, speedy recovery for Rashid Rice. I don't know if the reports have officially come out, but all signs are pointing to an ACL tear. And we know how long of a rehab that takes. I hope that he has people surrounding him that love him, and I hope that he gets back on the field as soon as he can. Because I'm sure there's no other place Rashid Rice would want to be right now than on the football field. So shouts out to them, and I hope for a speedy recovery. Oh, boy. Yet again, this is yet another week where we had 2 Monday Night Football games. I don't get it, but hey, all right. Now, this is yet another one of those games where there's two sides there's two sides that you can say, and you really essentially wouldn't be wrong about each. You can say the Lions beat the Seahawks 42-29. However, the Seahawks were down so many players. They were down so many stars, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It's like, what do you expect? They had such a long injury report that they damn near had an injury report that rivals the 49ers injury report. And it's just like, what do you expect? However, Geno Smith threw for 395 yards. Kenneth Walker had 12 carries, 80 yards, 3 touchdowns. Even DK Metcalf had over 100 receiving yards. The defense wasn't defensing for the Lions a lot of the game. Or you could say, well, Jared Goff did set an NFL record for most completions in a row without a incompletion. He went 18 for 18. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a game. This is yet another game where both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery just dominated. Both had multiple touchdowns. I will say this, and I said this coming into the season. Monday kind of reinforced a lot that I believe, and that is when the Lions are firing on all cylinders, when the Lions have both offense and defense humming, they will rival anybody for the best team in football. I think that there are some question marks on the defensive side of the ball still, but when their defensive line is as ferocious and playing well and getting to the quarterback as it did on Monday against the Seahawks, then even though the rookie, almost every defensive flag that was thrown on the Lions was on, I forgot his last name. But the rookie corner for the Lions, it just felt like every single penalty on the defense side of the ball was on him, and he just kept looking at the screen, just like, what? But then when you look at the replay, it's clear as day pass interference. But Boy, there was not as great as the Ravens looked. You can argue there wasn't a team that looked better than the Lions this past NFL week. And them black jerseys was sweet too. I'm not gonna lie to you, but they looked. Even Jamison Williams had a huge touchdown play. Like, I will give credit where credit is due, man. Geno Smith was balling. Like, he did not. It felt like there were multiple times where the Seahawks wanted to quit and they just wanted to say, all right, this just isn't our game. But Geno Smith did not let them happen. There were times when DK Metcalf called it, like, he subbed himself out. Things just weren't working out. But you can tell that they kind of rallied behind Geno Smith and his we're going to go out. Bro, Geno Smith threw the ball 56 times. To put that in perspective, that is a lot of times to throw the ball, especially in an NFL game. I don't know. I don't think that the Seahawks would have won if they were completely healthy, but I don't think it would have been 42-29. Like, I think it would have been a little bit closer. And I don't know if Jared Goff would win 18 for 18, but shouts out for him for setting an NFL record with most consecutive completions. The two best teams by far this NFL weekend that looked like the two best teams was the Baltimore Ravens and the Detroit Lions. And for the Lions, if they play like that, I don't know who is going to beat them. That's including anyone in the AFC. We've seen kind of like, because I talked about this with Anthony Richardson, which we'll talk about soon, but Anthony Richardson kind of has a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing to him. Like, when he's really good, he's really good. But then when he's really bad, he is extremely bad. I kind of felt that way with Jared Goff and this Lions team. We've seen them was like, when they played the Bucs and how they got into the red zone like 5-6 times and didn't score not once. It's like, wait, how does a team with all that talent just look this pedestrian? Then you get what we saw on Monday. It's like, this team looks like the best team in football. Again, shouts out to both the Lions and the Seahawks. The Lions beat the Seahawks 42-29, and I think that firing all cylinders is not a team that is better right now than the Detroit Lions. That's just me. Let's move forward. Man. Let's talk about this is probably the weirdest game I've ever seen in my life. This is probably the weirdest NFL game I've ever seen in my life. Because nearly everything, if you look at the individual players, if you look at time of possession, if you look at just who was on the field compared to who, everything should have spelt a win for the Jets. Yet, as we sit here, the Broncos beat the Jets 10-9. I've heard a lot of people say it from Sunday to now. How difficult it can be to have a culture-changing player come into an organization. Have a player that, when your organization isn't used to success, when your organization isn't used to attention, and then you bring a player like Aaron Rodgers, who, in all intensive purposes, is considered one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And while, yes, Aaron Rodgers only has one Super Bowl, he has the most recent Super Bowl compared to the Jets franchise. When you bring in someone like that, it is difficult to I guess you can say, change the culture. Which is why I think you're seeing a lot of these back and forths with Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh. Some of these weird interactions, some of these weird quotes that Aaron Rodgers has to answer or Robert Saleh has to answer. Or you see, bro, I think they had 5 false starts. They had like 7 offensive penalties, 5 of them being false starts. Or the fact of Greg the Leg, or I think Greg Zuerlein or something, missed the game-winning kick. Yo, Aaron Rodgers threw for 225 yards. I think Bo Nix didn't even throw for 70 yards. I don't even think Bo Nix had more than 6 or 7 completions. In fact, let's dig deeper. Bo Nix had 12 completions for 60 yards. And they won. I'm not going to, say that this is a huge indictment on the Jets, but these first few games were supposed to be layups for the Jets. Outside of, I guess, the first one when they went against the 49ers. These last few games should have been layups, and now they're 2-2 and about to go into an extremely tough stretch. I think the next game is the Bills. So, congratulations to Bo Nix and the Broncos. But they were the Jets. This is yet another week where Robert Saleh's coaching comes into question. There was some decisions that he made. It's like, bro, that's not. What are you doing? And it does seem like, even though it was 10-9, it does seem like he was outcoached by Sean Payton. I will agree with Aaron Rodgers. I think this is an anomaly game because Aaron Rodgers, again, 225 yards and didn't have a touchdown pass. And that's another thing, yo. Why did you abandon the run? I talk about this with the Ravens all the time. You have Breece Hall, bro. Why are you abandoning the run? I think they ran less than 10 times. Like, what are you doing? Against the team. Well, don't get me wrong, the Broncos defense is pretty good. It ain't that good, bro. And I do agree with Aaron Rodgers. When you hold a team to 10 points, you got to win the game. So I'm not going to say that it's doom and gloom and for the Jets. They're 2-2. I think that, you have obviously much more football ahead of them than behind them. That it hasn't looked the best. And I said this going into the season, that I don't think there's a team with more pressure. Even with the Kansas City Chiefs trying to three-peat, I don't think there's a team with more pressure on their backs than the Jets for a multitude of reasons. But shouts out to the Broncos and for beating the Jets 10-9. So let's move forward. I hear it now. In fact, I've been hearing it. A.J. Brown didn't play. Devontae Smith didn't play. That's why the Buccaneers beat the Eagles 33-16. The best thing about this Eagles team all year so far has been Saquon Barkley. I will give credit where credit is due. Saquon Barkley has been incredible. And going into the season, I said that, at least on paper, the Philadelphia Eagles are supposed to be one of those teams that should be in Super Bowl contention. You have all the players, you have some of the best players in the NFC on paper. And as we saw last week, the defense, especially their defensive front, whether we talk about Jalen Carter, whether we talk about Jordan Davis, they have the ability to be a force in the NFL. Their defense, Nakobe Dean, their defensive front, Brandon Graham, like they can get to it. But then we see games like we saw on Sunday. And nearly every position was outplayed by the Buccaneers. Jalen Hurts was drastically outplayed by Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had 347 yards, 2 touchdowns. Saquon Barkley did outplay the running position, but Bucky Irving did have a touchdown. Mike Evans just completely made the secondary of the Eagles look a lot like they did last year. Terrible. Mike Evans had a touchdown for 84 yards. I'm not going to lie to you. As the weeks go by, and I keep seeing how the Eagles look, I keep seeing some of their coaching decisions. I hear Jalen Hurts have a pretty peculiar response when asked about him and Nick Sirianni's relationship, sort of. I'm losing more and more faith in this Eagles team. In fact, I'm starting to believe that last year's Eagles team is more and more like the Eagles team that we're going to see more than what's on paper. Now, yes, I know Lane Johnson didn't play and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but this is yet another game where Jalen Hurts has turnovers again. Might I add you, since the start of the 2023 season, he has the most turnovers in the NFL. This is the same NFL that has Trevor Lawrence in it, which we'll talk about shortly. But the Buccaneers team just manhandled them, bro. They beat them in every facet of the game. And this Eagles team does not look good. I'll be real with you. I will be real with you. But shouts out to the Buccaneers for beating the Eagles 33-16. Yo, the fact that this is the team in the Buccaneers that bounced you out the playoffs last year in the Philadelphia Eagles, you would think that they come in with a little bit of aggression, with a little bit of anger, like, all right, we need to get our get back. This is a team that essentially knocked us out from reaching our goal last year, and they came out flatter than a crepe. It just didn't look good, man. But shouts out to the Bucs. I am fully, and I mean fully, on the hype train now. I don't think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be Super Bowl contenders. I still question if a team led by Sam Darnold can be a Super Bowl contending team. But all the doubts that I had about Sam Darnold as a starter, all the doubts I had about, is this Vikings team really good or are they just getting lucky? Nah, they're good. The Vikings beat the Packers, who, might I add, even though Jordan Love came back, the Packers look good. Now, Jordan Love didn't look the greatest, even though he did throw for 389 yards. But there were times, and he had 4 touchdowns, but there were times, and they did lose Christian Watson again. But I'm so high on Sam Darnold right now. I'm so high on Brian Flores in this defense. Yo, the Vikings look incredible. There's not a position right now. Again, I know it's early, but there's not a position right now where you can look and say that they're at a huge disadvantage. The connection with Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson is just magnificent. I was very skeptical because, again, I'm used to seeing Sam Darnold not look nearly as good as this. And the Vikings look incredible. He looks incredible. And he went up against a Packers team that looked pretty good, even though the Packers did go down huge. Yo, Jordan Love scored 22 points in the fourth quarter. But I am, until they prove me wrong, I am fully on board with this Vikings team. There's only 2 teams in the NFL that's 4-0, and one of them is the Vikings. And it's not like, again, the Packers, that's a team. They played against the 49ers. They played some teams. Shouts out to the Vikings, bro, Sam Darnold. Again, this is a perfect example of what happens when you're in the right system. Sam Darnold looks incredible, bro. This Vikings team is really good. And they beat a Packers team that's really good. Like, I don't feel less about the Packers after this. I mean, again, this was Jordan Love's first game back. Remember, when Jordan Love got hurt in San Paulo, we didn't think Jordan Love was coming back this year and for him to come back after a few games, and he looked really good. He threw for 4 touchdowns. Now, there were some times he just didn't look dead, but again, he's coming back. But Sam Darnold looks great, man. Shouts out to the Vikings for beating the Packers 31-29. And the Vikings being one of 2 teams now that are undefeated. The other one being obviously the Kansas City Chiefs. So, you know what's crazy about this game? Let me first say the Colts beat the Steelers 27-24. What is crazy about this game is that the one game that the Steelers lost, I feel much more confident now than I did with any of the wins. I feel more confident in Justin Fields now than I did with any of the wins. Justin Fields had the game, like he had an incredible game, threw for 312 yards, had 1 passing touchdown. Like he looked great. And if it wasn't for some questionable play calling at the end, if it wasn't for some mistakes, which we're going to have, they would have won this game. This is the first game that the defense let down the offense. First game that I can remember for a couple years now for the Steelers, where the offense played pretty well in key spots or in some spots, and the defense did not. And I feel much better about Justin Fields now than I did before when they were 3-1 or 3-0. And I am actually more confident that this Steelers team is going to be extremely good going forward than I did before they lost. Because again, I just felt like there was such a gap and such a distance between how the offense was playing compared to how the defense was playing. But the offense, it wasn't incredible, but it was really good. And again, if it wasn't for some questionable play calling and if it wasn't for the defense, Steelers would have won. Now with the Colts. Let me first say I hope that Anthony Richardson's injury, I think it was his hip, I hope that is not serious. I hope that he's able to come back and be healthy and have a long season and long career. I hope he's back next week. And this is yet another time where Joe Flacco has to come and save the day. Yo, Joe Flacco looked incredible. Joe Flacco was pretty good last year. The only problem with Joe Flacco, which obviously came back to bite him in the playoffs, was he turned the ball over a lot. But Joe Flacco has probably been the most unpredictable resurgence I've seen in years when we talk about the NFL, man. Joe Flacco was incredible. And this is also a Colts team that is dealing with a lot of injury. But they were able to finally hand the Steelers their first loss. And I don't think, now again, I could be extremely wrong, but I don't think that if you're the Colts, you hope that you have Joe Flacco as a starter for a long period of time. Obviously, you want Anthony Richardson to be healthy. And I will say that the Colts did look good on Sunday before Anthony Richardson went out. But they just looked exceptional after. So I hope, again, for a speedy recovery, but shouts out to the Steelers. Shouts out to the Colts for beating the Steelers 27-24. Oh, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. Hey, what is losing? You know? Like, what even is losing? What even is a losing record? I couldn't tell you. What is it like not having a quarterback that continues to break records? I don't know. What is it like having a rookie quarterback set record after record, week after week? I couldn't tell you, because I'm definitely on the other side of that fence. The Commanders went into Arizona and destroyed them 42-14. Jaden Daniels became the first player in NFL history to have back-to-back games where throwing 80% or more. Definitely the first rookie to do that. Actually, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it's like not having a franchise quarterback. All seriousness aside, this was a great win. I think this was obviously Herb Street coming back. Or, not Kurt Herbstreit. Cliff Kingsbury, coming back. He used to be the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Now he's the offensive coordinator for Washington. And again, Jaden Daniels looked great. 26 for 30, 233 yards, one passing touchdown. I think he had a rushing touchdown. He definitely had a rushing touchdown. This was just complete domination. And obviously, I don't think that this is going to – you're not going to maintain this level of greatness from Jaden Daniels. Like, he's not throwing 80% or more every game. But this is what greatness looks like. And this is why a lot of people were so high on Jaden Daniels, including myself, which is – yes, I'm not going to lie to you. I wouldn't have been mad if we got Caleb Williams. Obviously, I'm not disrespecting Caleb Williams. I'm just saying he obviously was the number one overall pick. But I'm not mad, Jaden Daniels. They look great. They look great. This Washington team is good, and I think that they're the best. Well, at least record-wise, they are the best team in the NFC East right now. I couldn't imagine. I don't even know what it's like being at the bottom of the NFC East after 4 weeks. Like, what is that? Is there even a bottom? I know there's a top, and we're at it. Also for the Cardinals, I think we have to start. I think we've seen the ceiling. I think we've seen the ceiling right now of Kyler Murray and this team. The offensive line is not good. They really only have two solid skilled pieces. That's James Conner and Marvin Harrison Jr. This team isn't that good, bro, like at all. And I thought defensively they were okay. That's it. They almost beat the Bills. But and they've looked okay defensively. It's just offensively they haven't looked really good this year. And I knew the Commanders were good going into it this year, at least with Jaden Daniels, but I just didn't think they were that much better than the Cardinals. Going into Arizona and doing that is crazy. Hey, though, Washington got their franchise quarterback. They got their franchise running back because Austin Eckler was out, but Brian Robinson picked up the slack. Terry McLaurin got what even is losing? I don't know. Shouts out to the Commanders for beating the Cardinals 42-14. I said that this was a very important game going into the week, and I think both teams play like it. The Falcons beat the Saints 26-24. Both teams didn't play too bad outside of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts didn't do anything. Oh, boy. One of the funniest things to do is watch and read and listen to fantasy football, like owners, like their reactions after games where their player didn't do much of anything, and listening to the discord between Kyle Hamilton owners has been marvelous. It's boy. But back to the real game. Both teams play like this was an important game. They're both 2-2, and obviously the division is still anyone's, even though right now it's kind of looking like the Bucs are creating distance between the Saints and the Falcons, which is crazy, seeing as how the Saints looked just 2 weeks ago. But both teams played this like it was an important game. It was really close. Young Ho Choi, had a game-winning 58-yard field goal to win the game. Derek Carr threw for 239 yards. He did have an interception, though. Bad interception at that. Alvin Kamara went back to the Alvin Kamara that we've seen for these last few years. 19 carries for 77 yards. More and more, bro. Like, I'm starting to think that the Saints that we saw against the Cowboys was more of an anomaly. Actually, the Saints we saw the first two games was more of an anomaly than the norm. And the Falcons didn't look great either, but they looked better. I mean, look, obviously people are going to say, the Saints lost because the pass interference that set up the Falcons should have been called. It was a egregious pass interference. Like, you remember the pass interference against the Saints versus the Rams in the playoffs? And it was like so egregious that the ref didn't call it. And how it's like been a talking point forever. And why people are saying the Saints are probably cursed because like there's no way in heaven or hell you could have saw that and not called it. That's kind of how it was for the Falcons and Saints. Now, yes, they need Tyrann Mathieu back. They need Devontae. They need I forgot his name. But they didn't have their top two defensive players, so that definitely hurt them. But yeah, as we sit here today, the Falcons and Saints are tied with the same record, and the Falcons beat the Saints 26-24. Shouts out to them. The other Monday Night Football game, we saw the Titans destroy the Dolphins 31-12. Look, I never said that the Tua was a bad quarterback. I never said Tua wasn't good. I may have said Tua didn't do enough to deserve the money that he got, which I do believe is true, in my opinion. I don't think that Tua is a good enough quarterback to lead this Dolphins to a Super Bowl or to high heights. I do believe that. But I never said Tua was bad. And looking at how the Dolphins look without Tua is a team that has all the weapons that it has. Tyreek, Jalen Waddle. They were terrible. To only leave with 12 points is crazy. At home, might I add. And Will Levis didn't even finish. Will Levis threw. I still can't get over that clip. Will Levis threw an interception. Another interception, might I add. Will Levis is starting to become the most memed person in the NFL, by far. It seems like every single week a new meme comes out about him. This week, he threw an interception. When I tell you, if you look straight, the guy that he threw the interception to looked like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. How big and swole he was. This and tall, might I add. Will Levis threw the ball right to the guy. It ain't like he ran. No, he threw it like he was throwing to him. And then said to his coaches, which they caught on camera, I didn't see him at all. Again, that's bro, you see where this phone is? It's it's like he was right there and said, I didn't see him. Will Levis, bro. And you lost to essentially Mason Rudolph. Yeah, the Dolphins are cooked without Tua. Cooked. You give the Titans their first win with Mason Rudolph as their quarterback majority of the way. Yeah. Yeah. And it sucks because Tyler Huntley, who was the backup, he didn't look great. So shouts out to the Titans for getting their first win, winning 31-12 against Miami. Now, I know a lot of the conversation was about Tua and his health coming back. We spoke about that here ad nauseum. I don't need to go into it anymore, but all the indications are saying he's coming back. So, yeah, they need you, brother. They need you. Oh boy, let's move forward. The Bears beat the Rams 24-18, and this game proved to me that Caleb Williams has a chance to be really good. I mean, he led 4 scoring drives in a row. And the Bears can be really good, but it also showed me that, the Rams are a really good team. Let's back up. Matthew Stafford is a really good player, but this team is not good enough to especially in the state that it is in with all the injuries. This team is not good enough to overcome mistakes. Now, maybe fully loaded, fully healthy maybe, but this team is not good enough to make mistakes. One thing that Matthew Stafford did not do a lot against the 49ers was make a lot of mistakes. This man, Matthew Stafford, had one of the worst games of the season, and it showed. Even though they only lost by, 6? If he didn't throw that interception at the goal line, and it was a bad interception too, it probably would have won. And overshadowed a big day from Caleb Williams. But they didn't. And Caleb Williams got a touchdown to DJ Moore. Keenan Allen came back. So I don't think that's a coincidence that the offense looked much better with Keenan Allen in the game. And I think they're going to be good, but the Rams did outplay them, I think, majority of the game. And Matthew Stafford did outplay Caleb Williams, but it was just those one or two mistakes that cost the Rams the game. And now the Rams are 1-3. So, shouts out to the Bears for beating the Rams 24-18. Let's talk about it. The Texans beat the Jaguars 24-20. And I think it was a matter of time before this was going to happen. It's crazy that there's only one team now. In fact, let me make sure this is a very correct stat, which I'm almost 9,000% sure it is. It is. If you would have told me going to week 4 after this whole offseason, if you would have told me that going into or leaving week 4, there's only one team that has a 0 in the win column, who would you think that team would be? Would you think the Panthers? I probably would. Would you think the Giants? I probably would. I may even think the Patriots. You know who I would not have thought would be that team that does not have a win going into week 5? The Jacksonville Jaguars. The team that just made their quarterback one of the highest paid quarterbacks in NFL history, in Trevor Lawrence. Let's get the Texans out the way. They didn't play the best. They still struggle with consistency at the run without Joe Mixon. Their offensive line wasn't the best, and they're still trying to develop a relationship between C.J. Stroud and the wide receivers. Even though Stephon Diggs did have a trick play that essentially ended in a touchdown where he was supposed to pass the ball, but he realized, oh shoot, no one's open. Let me go run it in. That worked, but the Texans didn't look great. But you know who looked worse? The Jacksonville Jaguars. And you knew it was coming, bro. When you pay, I said it, and it's clear. Money breeds expectations. And when you're paid as much as someone like Trevor Lawrence is paid, you're expected to not be the problem or not be part of the problem. You're expected to be the solution. And if you aren't the solution, you're expected to at least not look like the trash that is around you. And I'm not saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars is trash. What I'm saying is they have not been good. In fact, let's take a deeper dive into this game. Trevor Lawrence, 18 for 33, 169 yards, 2 touchdowns. That does not tell you the huge picture. That doesn't tell you the whole picture. It doesn't tell you the fact of how many times he overthrew his receivers or how many times he underthrew his receivers. Yo, he had a potential walk-in touchdown that he could have gave Christian Kirk, and he threw that jump like 12 feet past him. And as you expected, Now, as we sit here going into week 5, they're 0-3. I mean, they're 0-4. Now people are starting to point the fingers at Trevor Lawrence. And rightfully so. This team is not that much different than last year. So where's in fact, you have Gabe Davis, who had 1 reception for -2 yards. Shouts out to him. Like, this team isn't that much different, yet they're winless. Obviously, they're going to point the finger at you. And rightfully so. He ain't been good. Oh, boy. Trevor Lawrence. They're saying that now they got to get off of Trevor Lawrence. Think about that, bro. And I'm not saying they're wrong. Trevor Lawrence hasn't shown anything to prove that he is the quarterback of the future outside of his bank account. It's like, dude, it's crazy how drastically different he looked compared to C.J. Stroud. And C.J. Stroud didn't even have the best game either. But he had a much better game than Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, man. Shouts out to the Texans for beating the Jaguars 24-20. And it's unfortunate the Jaguars is the only team in the NFL now without a win. So, the 49ers beat the Patriots 30-13. This is the defense carried the 49ers this game, even though George Kittle did have an incredible touchdown catch. And Mason rushed for 123 yards and a touchdown. This was the defense. It was sack after sack. Fred Warner had a pick 6. The defense carried the 49ers. And this is the same defense that has not looked great. So I will give them credit where credit is due. They have not looked great all year, and they came to play, albeit it was against the Patriots. The defense looked like, without a lot of their key players, it looked as ferocious as we're used to seeing the 49ers defense. And questions are starting to arise about the Patriots and when they should or should not start Drake May, seeing as though Jacoby Brissett has not looked good at all. Again, he's looked like what you would essentially think a backup that is masquerading as a starting quarterback would look like. That's no offense. I know it sounds really harsh. There's no offense to him, but he's not a starting caliber quarterback for a winning team. And I hope to God that the Patriots do not listen to these people and listen to these questions and feel like there is pressure for them to play Drake May. I think the absolute worst thing that they can do right now is throw Drake May out there behind that offensive line. Now, it's unfortunate that Jacoby Brissett will have to be the casualty here, but this offensive line is probably the worst offensive line in football. Now, you can say they were going against the 49ers. What do you expect? They've looked this bad all year. And I'm starting to look at the Bengals much worse, seeing as though they have one win. Their offensive line is so bad that they should not have a win. They should be sitting on the same winless boat as the Jaguars. Boy, the Patriots, do not throw Drake May out there. You talking about ruining a player's confidence, ruining a player's future. They have a shot of doing that if they throw Drake May out there behind this offensive line. Get it together. But shouts out to the 49ers for beating the Patriots 30-13. Yo, this is the first time this year where the Browns have lost, and I don't think it was on Deshaun Watson that much. No, his numbers aren't eye-popping, but, yo, the Raiders beat the Browns 20-16. I don't know how many times I got to watch Amari Cooper or I got to watch one of these Browns running receivers drop a clear-cut pass. Like, Amari Cooper has a bunch of drops this year. I know it seems like he has a drop or two a game at this point. I could be wrong. I could be sizing it, but that's what it seems like. Now, I know damn near his entire offensive or two key players in the offensive line wasn't there, and it showed. Like, this offensive line was getting manhandled. And on top of that, there was one of the worst holding calls of all time, which negated a Amari Cooper touchdown that obviously would have won them the game. But this wasn't on. Even though Deshaun Watson didn't have spectacular numbers, it wasn't on him. It was his offensive line was god awful, and that holding call just kind of threw the game out of whack right there. And for the Raiders, shocker, looks like they're shopping Devontae Adams now. Look at that. Who would have thought? Outside of everyone that's been saying that for the last 2 years now. Actually, since they gave up Derek Carr, we knew Devontae Adams' time in Vegas was going to be quite short. But hey, it is what it is. Shouts out to the Raiders for beating the Browns. Shouts out to the Bengals for getting their first win, beating the Panthers 34-24. Not gonna lie to you, it didn't look good at all. Actually, it looked the very opposite of good. It didn't look great. They could have lost that game. Chuba Hubbard, their defense still has issues. Chuba Hubbard rushed for 104 yards. Even though the connection between Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow was good, Jamar Chase had 3 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Joe Burrow threw for 232 yards, 2 touchdowns. It looked like him and, they got their spunk together, but their defense is still very questionable. And it did show up on times, but they could have lost, but they didn't. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, Shouts out to the Bengals for beating the Panthers and Andy Dalton 34-24. So that was week 4. I do want to briefly talk about the trade since we're knee deep in, media days and the training camp's about to start for the NBA. Excuse me. One of the biggest trades that we saw come out of nowhere, honestly, I think it happened on Friday. It was Karl-Anthony Towns getting traded to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick. I'll first talk about what I think this means for the Knicks. I don't think there was a real question that Julius Randle had a tough time playing alongside Jalen Brunson. I don't think that it couldn't happen. I don't think that they were unable to play alongside each other. But Julius Randle is a person that thrives with the ball in his hands, and I am interested to see how that playoff run would have fared last year if Julius Randle was healthy. I think they would have had a better chance. But Julius Randle is a player that thrives with the ball in his hand. And he has shown that he doesn't do much without the ball in his hand. And we also saw how they struggled more times than not, him and Jalen Brunson, to coexist on the floor. And then you throw in Dante DiVincenzo, who had a career year last year. I understand the allure and the thought of this was going to be a very big year for the Knicks with a healthy Jalen Brunson, with a healthy Julius Randle, with a healthy Dante DiVincenzo, with a healthy team, because you also brought in Mikal Bridges, you have OG Anunoby, you have Josh Hart. This is one of those teams that could find themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals, or could be at least near the top of the Eastern Conference. But I also understand the allure of, okay, well, we've seen they didn't look the best. Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, they didn't look the best together, and they have an opportunity to get someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, who I don't think is a good player. I mean, is a good number one option, but as a number two option, I think has a chance to be really good, and surrounded by pieces that he's not the focal point, but he's a very big, like, I think they're really good. And I think that the Knicks knocked it out the park. You don't like losing Dante DiVincenzo, especially seeing as though you're trying to create the Nova Knicks, and you saw he had a career year, especially shooting the ball last year. A lot of that was due to the fact of he was one of the only players that were constantly available. Since we saw a bunch of players from McBride to OG Anunoby, all of them were hurt. So I think that getting Karl-Anthony Towns is going to be big. And you pairing him alongside someone like Mikal Bridges, someone like Josh Hart, so Josh Hart doesn't have to constantly play. Well, I don't know, because Mitchell Robinson doesn't look like he'll be healthy anytime soon. So it looks like Karl-Anthony Towns would have to play the 5, means Josh Hart might have to play the 4 again. You did lose Isaiah Hartenstein, but I do think that Karl-Anthony Towns is a in a lot of terms is a step up from Isaiah Hartenstein. I think it was a home run get for the Knicks. Yeah, you had to give up a first round pick, but looking at where the Knicks are going to be, I think that the pick is going to be a high pick anyways. So now you have, I think, a really good number 2 option, a guy that one of the best, if not the best, shooting big man, self-proclaimed shooting big man ever. He had a 60-point game. Was it last year, 2 years ago? That Karl-Anthony Towns can get a bucket, and he can play defense when he wants to. I am not happy with obviously what we saw in the playoffs when he went up against Nikola Jokic. No, when he went up against the Dallas Mavericks, and how he had the mismatch the whole series and didn't capitalize. But who knows? It could be different. I don't understand this for the Timberwolves though. It's like, you say that this is to maximize Anthony Edwards' potential, yet you're adding a player that thrives with the ball in his hands and Julius Randle, and doesn't really particularly do much else outside of score the ball. And then on top of that, I don't know how much minutes Dante DiVincenzo is going to get, especially when you have Jaden McDaniels, you have Mike Conley. I don't know where Dante DiVincenzo is going to fit in, especially when reports are saying he wasn't too happy with the whole Nova Knicks because he saw his minutes were going to diminish. I don't know how much minutes you think you're going to get, or he thinks he's going to get, or how much minutes he can get for the Timberwolves. On top of that, the Timberwolves were just in the Western Conference Finals. I just don't. And if you replay it back, Karl-Anthony Towns was a huge reason why they overcame the Denver Nuggets. So I don't like the trade. Now I know Julius Randle can score. I know he can be a big piece, but that's, he's going to have to accept being a second option. And if he's able to do that, then I think it's going to be good. But I honestly think Karl-Anthony Towns at his best is better than Julius Randle. So I don't know. especially if reports are coming out true that Karl Anthony Towns didn't want to be traded. I just think it was a win for the Knicks. I don't really like it for the Timberwolves, but hey, shouts out for all parties involved. So, yeah. I also want to say we are in MLB playoffs, and shouts out to the Mets for sneaking in the last day, as well as the Braves. I honestly, man, I it's hard for me to not picture the Dodgers, seeing how good they've been. I think the Dodgers are gonna win it all. I know that when you look at the history, that's kind of like far-fetched, and usually teams that have incredible regular seasons don't really have the best postseason. But when you see just how good that they're playing with Ohtani, with Mookie, with Freddie Freeman, I don't see, and they have incredible pitching, I don't see how the Dodgers lose. I could say that about the Knicks as well. I mean, no, the Yankees as well. They're kind of firing all cylinders right now too. So I'm gonna say that the Dodgers make it to the World Series, and I was saying the Orioles, but the Orioles have terrible pitching. Boy. You know, I'm going to say the Kansas City Royals. Nah, I'm going to say, you know what, whatever. I'm going to say the Yankees and Dodgers make it, because I don't think the Cleveland Guardians are going to win. I don't see that. So it could, but I don't see it. I got the Yankees and the Dodgers making the World Series, and I have the Dodgers winning it all. So we'll see. Before we go, I want to say rest in peace to Dikembe Mutombo, one of the pioneers of the NBA back in the day, one of the best defensive big men. He's a great, from all these stories you're hearing, all the philanthropy that he's doing, you know, in Africa, being one of the head leaders in the NBL, National Basketball League, that's overseas and stuff, and all the money he's putting back, or he put back into Africa when we talk about centers and housing. You know, he's one of the greats, and it's not one of the names that you think of, obviously, when you think of the history of basketball, but when you hear Dikembe Mutombo, you know, yeah, he was defensively, he was one of them. I know he passed of, you know, ending his battle with brain cancer. That cancer word, bro. But rest in peace to Dikembe Mutombo, and much love to his family. Also, rest in peace to Pete Rose, one of the greatest players in MLB history. If you just took what he did as a player, he is definitely Hall of Fame worthy. It's just, you know, you can't be a manager betting on the baseball while you're a manager and then lying about it. Like, you can't do that. And on top of that, you accepted a lifetime ban. Maybe if you didn't accept it and you fought it, I don't know. I do think that Pete Rose is one of those people that definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but I also understand why he's not. But him not being in the Hall of Fame is not the talk right now. I do want to say rest in peace to, I think he has still the longest hitting streak in MLB history. And he's one of the greatest baseball players we've ever seen, hands down. So rest in peace to Pete Rose. And there you have it, man. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, links in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate all of you guys. If you like the content, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. I do appreciate all of you guys. Also, if you listen on the DSPs, please subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your DSPs and wherever you're listening. I appreciate you all. Please subscribe. Please follow. It means a lot. Also, please follow the socials. Follow Instagram. Follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily, whether we talk about reels, whether we talk about stories, clips. Please follow the reel or follow the socials. I know a lot of people are getting on me about my Derrick Rose take, or if you comment and you keep it respectful, I don't mind going back and forth. It just means that you're very passionate about whatever we're talking about and you're listening to me, which I truly appreciate. So please follow the socials. Until next time, much love.